Hey guys, Soumil and I are back on the Pits to Podium channel. In this video, we are going to talk about how it may finally be of importance to be a reserve driver for a Formula One team. So up until now, being a reserve driver probably just was a tag. You barely got a few miles in the car because there were actually very few limited opportunities for you to drive at least this year's car, right? But 2020 might just change all that. It could just be an exception out there for being a reserve driver for a Formula One team. What do you think, Soumil?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think it's been such a long, long time since we actually had reserve drivers and test drivers actually do something in Formula One. The last I remember, I think in around 2006 and 7, when you had more open testing modes, teams used to go for testing, and they used to have their more experienced driver coming in and doing some miles in the car, trying to understand what can be improved and what cannot be improved, and coming back and giving some good feedback. And you had expert drivers like Marc Genet, Pedro de la Rosa, these kind of people who actually used to go in there and used to have a designated job of testing the car and giving that information. Now it's just, as Kunal, you rightly mentioned, it's just become more of a name tag with more younger drivers with barely any experience going out there to, well, just wearing the suit and trying to be in the promotional videos, that's all. They barely get any testing mods now that things have been clamped down so much. But finally, there may be an opportunity for reserve drivers and test drivers, so to say, to maybe get more track time, because what really has happened over here is maybe if a couple of drivers, if they may fall ill because the whole coronavirus situation is just trying to become a bit so hectic. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But if something like that happens, if there are any travel restrictions, any travel bans or something like that, just maybe it could be an opportunity for the reserve driver, and which is a role that has literally had its importance diminished a whole lot in the last decade, come back to prominence.
Yeah, you mentioned Marc Genet and Pedro de la Rosa. To me, they're like the Michael Schumachers of being test drivers and reserve drivers.
Absolutely.
They did for
Absolutely.
years at no end, and but like you said, we hope it never happens. But if it does happen to any particular driver, the FIA and Formula One have been very clear that the races will still go on. And I understand that as we keep saying in sport media and entertainment, the show must go on. And
Absolutely.
that if that happens, we might very well see a reserve driver step in and probably even end up driving a race. And I think it's a very unprecedented situation, but it's probably an understandable solution to make
Hmm.
sure that when we begin racing, we keep racing, right? But the tricky parts here is that there are several teams that actually share reserve drivers. So McLaren, Mercedes, and Racing Point share Esteban Gutierrez and Stoffel Vandoorne as reserve drivers. So of course, one hopes that nobody catches a virus, okay? But imagine if out of these six drivers, more than two drivers catch a virus. I don't know who they're going to put in the car, right?
Exactly.
At the same time, there is also Williams, who have test drivers, reserve drivers, development drivers, who've had very few miles in a Formula One car, right? So I don't know how it's going to all pan out in case these teams actually need to call upon a reserve driver.
No, it's going to be rather tricky because, as we just mentioned previously, back in the day, you used to have people with a lot of experience being your test drivers. So you kind of expected them to get in there and be on the pace almost immediately. But if you look at the roster that Williams have got, for instance, and they've just got a heap of test drivers everywhere, it's as if they're just distributing out roles for free. So you've got Jack Aitken, if I'm not mistaken. You've got Jamie Chadwick in there as well. Who else have they got? Roy Nissany is also one of the drivers involved. So it's almost a bit like you've got too many people in the job who haven't really tried out the car themselves. So what happens in that case? Of course, there's always a bit of energy and lots of excitement involved when you've got a new driver fresh in there, jumping in the car for the very first time. But as we have seen time and again, the testing miles are becoming ever lower. And these drivers who have just jumped in for Formula 2 or something like that, they might be able to struggle quite a bit because I haven't done anything.
Yeah. And things like super licenses, will they be valid? That'll become a
Yeah,
question
exactly.
as well, right? And then there are also questions like just how many reserve drivers will Formula One as a sport keep transporting to at least the first eight races? Because there are drivers like Vandoorne, there are drivers like Marcus Ericsson, even Pascal Wehrlein. Now they aren't necessarily present at all the races that happen on the calendar. So will Formula One go out of their way to say, that's it, we need a massive contingency plan and we need to make sure as many reserve drivers are available, right? And
Exactly.
my mind even goes back to teams like Renault and Haas, because they have reserve drivers who've never driven at a Grand Prix event in Formula One.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
it's going to be, and again, we say this also for safety reasons, because yes, these guys may be talented, but it takes a different level of experience, a different level of awareness, and so on, to make sure you're driving fast and safe through a whole Grand Prix. So interesting times ahead.
Oh, yes, indeed. And it's completely one aspect of driving in the simulator. And let's say when you have the likes of Pascal Wehrlein, Pietro Fittipaldi, these guys are doing a lot of sim time with their respective teams. But when you actually come down to the Formula One car, as we saw Alex Albon doing in his very first test in 2019, it's a completely different ballgame. It's so easy to make a mistake here and there. And now the teams are having to lay off so many people. And a crash like that could set them back big money. And nobody would actually ever want something like that happening. And just before we wrap up the video, if you're wondering who's going to drive for who, it's going to be a very tricky thing, because as Kunal mentioned, the likes of Esteban, Gutierrez, and Stoffel, Vandoorne, they're being shared by 3 teams between them. The likes of Haas, well, they've got Pietro Fittipaldi, who has never really driven at a Grand Prix event. Renault, who have they got? I think they've got Guanyu Zhou. He's fast, but is he quite the driver who'd like to place in a Formula One car at this moment? I don't think so. Who else have we got? McLaren are also sharing their drivers with someone else. Ferrari may have to revert to Pascal Wehrlein, and who may be under contract from Porsche. So you might see some major conflict of interest. Marcus Ericsson is back racing in the USA, so he may not be able to come. And thankfully, they've got Robert Kubica with them. But it's all a very complicated matter. It's all good to say we've got our test drivers with us to try and back things up in case something happens. But as Kunal rightly mentioned, that contingency plan, managing something like that could be an even tougher headache for Formula One management.
Yeah, and it'll all show, because we'll see the number of drivers that land up at the first race, and that will sort of just show what Formula One's mental state is about the whole virus and how scared they are of drivers contracting it. Because if we see an overdose of all these drivers just waiting in line to pick the next cockpit chance that they get, it could mean that people are still really scared of what COVID-19 could do to Formula One. But it's all understandable. It seems like a part of Formula One's game plan. And Liberty Media have done fairly well to sort of try and host races despite the virus threat being there. So I'm all for what they're trying to do. But let's see if a reserve driver actually gets a call to become a Formula One driver in 2020. It could well change somebody's career for good. Who knows? But on that note,
absolutely.
guys, yes, and thanks so much for joining me on yet another video, Soumil. And guys, if you enjoy this video, like, subscribe to our channel, and we will see you at another video. Thank you so much.
See you, everyone. Bye-bye.